So my name is Lindsay Payne, and I kind of wear multiple hats on this campus. I'm the director for service learning, so I kind of run and oversee service learning programs broadly on campus, which means helping faculty, helping community partners as they engage in these types of courses. And then I also teach in the Environmental and Ecological Engineering department. I teach a seminar course, and then I teach in my own service learning course around stormwater management and putting in urban, we call them best management practices, so rain gardens, rain barrels, things like that. So I'm really bringing together information from my perspective as a professional in this service engagement space, but also including information from our community partners. So I spend a lot of time out in the community talking to them and trying to figure out how to make our work better. So Amy Wood, who is not here today, but she's kind of my partner in crime, she's contributed a lot to these presentations. So just kind of give you a sense of, this isn't just Purdue speaking, this is also our community having a say as well. So today we're going to talk about self-assessment and this word called positionality. We'll get into more about what that means. We're going to talk about ways to self-assess and then ultimately discuss ways we can actually address this idea of positionality with our community partners. So first things first, why do we do this? So why would we self-assess? Well, I think broadly we do it to kind of understand who we are, right? So on the surface, when you see me, what do you see? Yes. A person, okay.
I was going to say a person who knows how to color code.
Oh, thank you. You should tell my kids that because they don't like my outfits, but thank you. Okay, so someone who knows how to color code. What else? What else do you see?
A vibrant person.
A vibrant person, okay. What else? Just looking at me.
Professional.
I look okay, all right, we'll take that. What else? What else?
Hold together?
Okay, you guys are so nice, but just like, who am I? What color is my skin?
Tan. Very light tan.
Okay, I'm white, right? Okay, I mean, just these like basic characteristics. When you see me, you see a white person, right? Yes, okay. I am a female, I identify as a female. You see that, right? Those are the things on the surface that you can see. But what you can't see about me is that I love gardening, or that I used to be a runner, but I don't run anymore, that I'm a mom of 2 little children, that I would consider myself middle class, right? You don't see that, but those are all things that ultimately determine who I am and how I function in this world. You all have some of those similar characteristics, right? Like on the surface, I can identify things about you, but that's not all who you are. But it's important to think about who you are as you're entering into these community spaces, right? Because my upbringing, my background, who I am and how I enter into spaces, if I look like a professional, if I am white, I am going to have easier access, bottom line, to communities in many ways, right? Because I bring this position of power. That's not necessarily a good thing. But that is a reality, right? Now, I may not have access to all communities because of those very reasons. But that matters, and that's something that I want you guys to think about as you're entering into these projects, okay? So, I have 2 scales I want you to complete. Don't take a lot of time stressing over the answers to these questions, okay? But very quickly go through them. There's front and back, and there are 7 questions on one side and 16 on the other. Just quickly go through and fill them out, okay? As you're going through, if you want to write notes in the margin, that's fine too, okay? So fill these out. Oh, okay, okay. I lost someone already. reverse scored, it means, and we're not going to score this, but it means that if you were to put an answer here that gave you, let's say you put a 7, when it was actually scored, that value would be less. But it doesn't matter for this purpose, so you just fill them out. That's when we evaluate them. Yeah, I'm not actually going to score these to give you a value of any of this. This is more just to start conversations. So. Okay, about 1 more minute. So get as many as you can get done in about 1 more minute. All right, well, go ahead and stop. If you didn't get them done, that's okay. But I just want to get the conversation started. So what I want you guys to do is get into, let's do pairs. So talk to someone beside you. It could do a group of 3 if we need to. And I want you to talk about these scales. I gave you some questions you could answer, but you can talk about anything related to these scales. So maybe quickly talk about how you got to your answers if there were specific questions that you had pause and you couldn't answer immediately. What did you discover about yourself, who you are, where you're coming from? How did this challenge your thinking as an individual about a group belonging or privilege or power? And then how might this impact the lens in which you're designing? So in small groups, 2s and 3s, you guys together will do maybe the 3 of you, the 2 of you here, the 2 of you, and then the 3 of you on the end. So have some conversation and then we'll kind of talk as a bigger group, okay? And you guys can move around if you need to conversation.
What do you guys think about people if they're entitled to have? Okay, I feel people get what you're entitled to have.
I feel like there are a lot of groups that I don't think much about, and I don't really know how to stuff. It feels like just like based on what like from media, I guess. It seems like for a lot of people, like no matter how hard they try, like they're United States, like we don't know. Yeah, so that's kind of
we don't know if everyone's efforts are noticed.
so that's kind of like the mentality
that aren't
that when I was going through this, I guess. I was like thinking about like my position, and then I was like kind of thinking like comparing it to like the position. I know, like I feel very privileged, so I have a hard time understanding the struggle of someone. Yeah, I guess I would like also say that like or so privileged. I wouldn't know what that's like to really be able to think about that situation in a lot of depth because I haven't ever been there.
They can't go to college and they're
Really interesting that you guys thought about it. I get that. Seeing other
stay in
But it's definitely not.
I think for that one, I definitely had a lot more wishful thinking. Like, this is my answer.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it's definitely not. Same with like, sometimes you have to step and people like get ahead, which is very good. If you can really go up, you're almost like,
It was actually like really interesting to
And I don't like that. It should be
it has to
more
be people
equal
working
than just a bunch of group.
Do you have any ones that are really
Basically all exactly
they
the
that
same.
really racked my brain?
I think it made me think I feel like there's some volunteer stuff globally and some in like Haiti and Honduras. And I think it made me think about like how when it says like just like
And I feel
just having like equal opportunities or something really interesting or like having their numbers on the notice what it looks like somewhere I would be noticed. And like get like I felt like a lot of those people there they worked like so hard and they're surprised that they're focused. So I don't know, it made me think a lot about like exactly how hard this work. Especially if you look at things like healthcare. Like things could just happen randomly, like car accidents. All that, and then it ends up
and like fixing these could just have like possibly like
anomalies something else.
yeah, or genetic anomalies. Like
That's a clear cut answer.
not every illness is the result of you've been smoking every day of your life.
Everyone to agree. Always the
That's the
hardest.
hardest part.
So, all right. How did you guys arrive at your answers? What did you guys talk about? Did you simply just fill it out? Was it stressful? Easy? How did you get to your answers? What did you guys talk about?
I kind of thought it was pretty easy. Like I know my ideals and like
Okay.
what I want to like see in the world.
Okay, so you approached it from a mindset of ideally,
Yeah.
this is what I want. Did others approach it that way? In your ideal, you thought it was an ideal? Okay, those of you that are kind of going, not really, how did you approach this?
Well, like for me, I was kind of going on the ideals, but one thing I found, especially with the back ones, was that the way they were worded made it really difficult to say like, oh, this is what this means. So I was kind of trying to go on like a very kind of cautious approach to what
Okay.
it meant, and kind of say it's like I'm going to take this and consider it in the most extreme way possible because that's how it's worded.
Okay, so you kind of had more of that guarded sort of approach as you were filling it out.
Yeah,
Okay,
this felt very unnuanced.
okay. How about others? Yeah.
I know for the social dominance, I was definitely more black and white,
Mm-hmm.
but because that's, but when I got to like the global belief, that's one of those things that like, it's what I want versus the reality, because I think I have more experience with the global belief section more than I really felt with like the global dominance. So that one was a lot more of battling like what I want versus what I know is the reality.
Okay, all right. How about you guys down there? Any other things to add? Different?
Asking myself similar questions while I like answered the social dominance questions. Like for some of them, it would be unfair in what sense, equal in what way,
Uh-huh.
places should they be kept in their place. So it's just a lot of things that I just didn't understand what it was trying to get. I didn't understand what kind of groups they were getting at.
Right, right. And it's meant to be ambiguous like that. That's part of the approach, right? Because it does cause you to question and sort of think about, wait, I need more information to answer this. It makes you think a little bit about, well, if this was easy, then maybe I'm not seeing the world holistically, or maybe I need to think about different things. So it's meant to be slightly, I would guess, generalized is a good way to say it. What did you discover about yourself, if anything? Who you are, where you're coming from, as you started to fill out these short scales? What did you discover
I kind of
or
found
reinforce?
out that while like I know like what I want, but I don't really like know, like I don't have a huge perspective on the world as a whole. I kind of just have, you know, like a local one.
What do you mean? Expand on that. Like local meaning?
Well, like I haven't been on like mission trips or anything like that, and haven't like seen like
Right.
those conditions hands on. I've just
Okay.
like, heard about them and
Sure.
know what I would want the world to be like.
So your perspective is really based on what you've seen and where you've been, right? Those of you that have maybe seen more, do you think that changed the way you answered these or no? Out of curiosity. I think you said you've traveled quite a bit. Did that impact your?
Yeah, I think the one that's talking about like their efforts are noticed and rewarded. Like I've been on to other countries to volunteer, and I've seen a lot of people that work really hard and do everything they can, and still like don't have enough to provide for their families and stuff. So it kind of made me think about it during this.
Okay. Anybody else? What about what you learned about yourself, though? Yeah.
I think it made me realize that it can be hard to expand my perspective and really think about how other people are living, because, I mean, I think I live a very privileged life in a lot of aspects. So it can be hard for me to imagine just how many people aren't quite as privileged and how many people have more privilege than me.
Right, right. And I think we all can say relatively that we're in an institution of higher education, so we all live a more privileged life than others, right? I mean, we're all in different spaces, but in general, we could say that. I think we stereotype ourselves. What about your project partners that you're working with? Are they in similar situations, would you say, in terms of socioeconomic status, access to services, things like that in the community? Are they like you or different, or a mix of both?
So for me and Isabella, the project we're working on is with a village in Brazil.
Ah, okay.
And, so they're in a very
Culturally very different
they're
spaces.
culturally very different, but also they have a much lower economic status.
Okay.
One of the major things that we have to like work with is figuring out what kinds of solutions for them would actually be viable.
Right, right. Okay. Any other projects where you're working in similar, like stakeholders? It's more fun when you guys talk. I'll let you go, then you go. Okay. Go ahead.
First?
Yeah, sure.
I actually have a really similar project. I'm working with this this community in Colombia that's just outside of the city, and they don't have access to clean water, so we're trying to build these water filters that they can build themselves. So a lot of our project is just making sure that materials are available for them and that it's not too expensive and they can actually afford it.
Right, right. How about?
We're actually in the Lakota team, so we're working with the Lakota tribe in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and it's pretty similar to that. You know, very low income, a lot of unemployment. It's real different.
Right.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah, it's very different space, right, than where you probably all have experience, perhaps even grew up. Were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of like on the contrary, me and Chesney's group.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah. Our project partner is about 5 minutes away in Lafayette.
Okay.
So like a lot of the things that they have are like similar to us, so we don't really have to think about like a tribe in Colombia.
Sure, but who's your partner?
We are with Imagination Station, which is the Children's Science Museum.
Yep.
So that's actually the one thing about demographics that we do have to think about, but it's not terribly difficult for us, is that we're working for a demographic of like 5 to 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
So everything we have to do, we have to think of the mindset of what little kid is going to do to this and how can this be broken by someone who's young. So we have to take a slightly different mindset because it's a lot of fun because we get to feel think more like children, and that's something we do have experience with. But also we have to think about all sorts of, like, especially in this community where we have a wide variety of different cultures.
Yeah.
Like how would, more than just like the type of children we were, but how do other types of kids who might go to Imagination Station interact with it?
Right. Because even Imagination Station, so I live 2 blocks from there. I'm very familiar with this place. I've worked with Imagination Station a lot. So even the demographic that they're trying to attract is not probably the demographic of people that, let's say, for example, would go to a high-dollar museum down in Indianapolis. So they're trying to get a lot of the local individuals that perhaps can't drive to the Science Museum. Maybe they don't have a lot of money and income in order to pay to go to those museums. So still a very different demographic, maybe not as extreme culturally as being somewhere in South or North Dakota, you said? South Dakota. Brazil, Colombia, right? It's still a very different demographic to think about. And you don't want to overlook those nuances because those do matter, right? Anything else about how you're, based on kind of what you learned about yourself, how that might impact your design? So as you're thinking about interacting with your partners, how might that impact those sort of conversation relationships? Yeah.
I mean, so for like my team, we're working with Gary, Indiana, so we
Okay.
sent out a survey to get like their cultural like foods that they want to be grown
Sure. Okay.
for our aquaponics system.
Right.
So like we sent out that survey and then they responded immediately back to us, so that was nice.
Okay.
About the plants that they want grown
Okay.
in that system.
So who did you send the survey to?
We sent it to our project partner, and we also sent it to, I believe it was his church. We
Okay.
sent it to.
So then the questions you need to ask yourself is who didn't fill that out, right? So whose voices weren't represented? I mean, if you got great response, fantastic. But I think it's also important for us to think about who's not participating, right? So there's probably individuals that may or may not access your aquaponic system and your food system, right? But they may not have had a say because for whatever reason they didn't fill it out. I was just listening to NPR and they're talking about the census. This is a perfect example of access, of comfort, right? So constitutionally, we are mandated to complete a census for our country every 10 years, right? Every citizen is required to complete the census. Why might some individuals not complete it even though technically they could be fined by not completing the census? Anyone? Thoughts? I mean, there's reasons people may not do it.
Not here legally.
Okay, so maybe they're not here legally, so there's that comfort of if I do fill it out, maybe I will be counted and thus deported. Okay, that could be one reason. Why else? Yeah.
Maybe having to work so much for their family to support them.
Yeah, maybe they just can't physically be able to take it. And so that's actually factoring in a lot of how they're going to deploy the census. They're having individuals doing it online. I mean, there's a litany of ways they're trying to access individuals because maybe they're working all day, all night, and they can't take time to fill out a census survey. Why else? There's all sorts of reasons, yeah.
Maybe they move a lot, like they could be in the military.
Sure, maybe they're in the military. How do we count those individuals? So it's just important to think about access when you're including perspectives in your project, right? All right. I like this slide. What does this slide tell you? What does it say? Equality, equity, reality. What are your reactions to this? I think I heard you guys talking about one of this that made sense and linked to this. What was it? Was it all groups should be given an equal chance? Was that the one that you were talking about? Or no? You guys were having a conversation around one of these that fits right here. So what do you think about this? So equality means everybody gets the resources, the same resources in life, right? Equity. Okay, so then individuals that maybe don't have access to all the resources and the means get a few more resources, so they're now at an equal playing level. The reality is you have individuals that start from very different places to begin with, right? Thoughts on that? Yeah.
People from different places need different kinds of resources.
Sure. Have you seen this before? Anybody seen this? Okay, some of you, yeah. What else can you say about this? Does it surprise anyone? Everyone's okay with it? Which section do you prefer? How does it hit home or not? Yeah.
Is that guy in a hole?
Yep. Yeah, he's in a hole. So, I mean, it's just a way of saying that, like, even, this person is already starting a lot lower, if you take it literally, right, than the other individuals. So he is definitely in a hole. Shorter and in a hole, right? Yeah. Other thoughts or reactions to all of this? Yeah.
So I know I'm not from the city. I'm from a medium small town. So whenever my parents are from a really big city. So whenever we go and visit, I always find it to be very jarring to see like income disparity. And just to talk with my parents about like what life was like growing up and like the areas that don't exist in my town and what it's like to live in one of like the poor suburbs of that city.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what that reminds me of, was just like talking to my mom about like, oh, why is it like that? And why aren't people going to school? Aren't there scholarships and that kind of thing? And getting that perspective from a place that like, that's very different from my hometown.
Right. And it's hard for us to understand that perspective if we have never seen it before and we didn't grow up that way. But I think it's important for us to at least acknowledge and start to try and understand that there's really big systemic issues that create this space. Big systemic issues These are challenges that I hope someday you all can fix, but it's going to probably take you the rest of your lifetime to do it, even if you get close to it, right? But it's all sorts of things, historically, currently, politically, socially, all of these things that create factors that ultimately have individuals that are in holes, some that are a little bit higher than others, and then some that have a lot of resources and access and support and can be in a very different place. And the reason I show this slide is because I want you guys to just continue to think about these things when you're doing your design, right? Because no matter who you're interacting with, there are some differences and there are also some similarities, but I think it's important to really think about where you're coming from, maybe where you are in this reality space, and where your project partners might be in that reality space as you're doing your design. So positionality, just to kind of hit on this word, is basically who you are as a person. All of those facets, those faces that you wear, that's who you are in terms of positionality. And that really does matter when you're going in and you're working with your community partners. And you need to think about that when you go in and you interface with them. I cannot for a moment discredit the fact that I have a specific color of skin if I'm working in a community that might be an entirely Latino community, because that does matter. It doesn't mean that I can't work in that community or that I can't be effective in that community, but I sure as heck better acknowledge that there is a difference and that I don't understand that culture. I can try and I can start to empathize, but I don't understand it, right? I didn't grow up as a Latina. I love lots of things that make me a very diverse person, but I have to also remember where I came from, and I came from a very small rural community with a bunch of white people and pigs, right? That frames my worldview. I have tried desperately to expand that the older I get by putting myself in situations where I try to understand and empathize with different people and different partners throughout my time. How do you go about this? So how do we think about this? I would just encourage you to continually reflect. So you're constantly interacting with your partners and you're constantly engaging in these spaces. And when things don't go right in your design, it may not necessarily be a technological problem. It probably isn't. I would say 9 times out of 10. It has something to do with understanding between you and your community partner. And it could simply be that you didn't clarify expectations. And that has nothing to do with the color of your skin, with your gender, nothing at all. That has everything to do with communication, right? But those are important things to think about in your design process. So constantly be reflecting and thinking about what's going on in your design. And why do we do it? We do reflect to understand, to bridge the gap between what's happening and what you're actually learning in the classroom, right? I don't know if you guys read any, you probably have never read Donald Schoen. Has anyone read this guy? I don't know why you would. But he has a really great book about professional practice and how to be effective professionals, specifically engineers. And one of the things that he points out is that you really need to have a reflective conversation. So that means it's a constant reflection and iterative process with your design. And that should make logical sense, right? No one designs anything right the first time. It just doesn't work that way. All right, so I have a couple more questions for you. So in that same small group, answer these questions. As a person who's not confident in addressing those issues with myself, how might I react if I'm faced with them in a community setting? Second question, how might I alter my interactions with community partners or community members in order to address the topics described within the scales? All right, so take a few minutes and talk with the group you were in.